CNBC, Yahoo Finance, all those guys have been kind of kissing the Warren Buffett ass this weekend with the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, as they do every year this time of year. And it just got me to wondering, like, there's been a lot of people that kind of like have either dismissed him. We saw Dave Portnoy saying, last year about how Warren Buffett's washed up. And I know that you take that with a grain of salt because it's Dave Portnoy. But there's been a lot of people that have been like, he's just out of touch. And, the whole Berkshire and not Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, they're just not in it anymore. And it's interesting because I actually looked at the performance of Berkshire. They obviously didn't beat the market last year. Over the last several decades, the 60s, 70s, and 80s were like the big years or big decades for Berkshire and Warren Buffett. Really, since then, they've still beaten the market, but it's been minimal. And really, last year, it was a big issue when he first added to the airlines, during the crash, and then sold all of them at the bottom of the market. And then the airline stocks came back. He also sold Apple after Apple had an 80% run last year. So like not all of his Apple, but a good chunk of Apple. So, and he even admitted that he made some mistakes last year, but it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, cause he always talks about how are greedy when others are fearful. And it seemed as if he kind of did the opposite of that last year. And it almost kind of seems like he's doing a lot of things that are against his own code. And I kind of wanted to get your perspective on just like whether or not you think that Warren Buffett is starting to become irrelevant.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Obviously the stakes are so much higher for him. And it's not as simple as just comparing it to our accounts, right?
Yeah,
we have nobody to answer to.
Right.
We have our risk tolerance. And comparatively, the amount of money is far smaller. And so also sort of the rules and regulations surrounding it are a little bit different. You can't be as nimble. So I think context is important. And so that's got to be sort of put in perspective. But probably, yes. I mean, I appreciate him admitting he made mistakes and taking accountability for that. I wonder how much of his I wonder what sort of their setup is behind the scenes and how much say Warren Buffett really has.
Yeah.
And who else is in there, in his ears? Who else is at the table, giving perspective as well? Because that move last year, especially with the airlines, felt really emotional. And, it's not usually, even though there's two faces, right? Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, I got to imagine there's a host of other people that are bringing data, bringing whatever. And so I think that's what you run into organizationally when you have too many people bringing ideas. And I think it's causing a problem.
Yeah, and him and Charlie both have brought in and kind of talked about their successors and who they're going to be and all that good stuff. They kind of had that lined up. And that was kind of like a big talk of the town last year about just kind of like talking about their own mortality. And I think there's definitely something to that. I think there's also just a lack of understanding, I think, to the changing times, so to speak. It's interesting that like Warren Buffett will go and buy some like Chinese EV companies and that sort of thing, but yet doesn't even give Tesla a second thought. And then you actually had Charlie Munger just this weekend talking about using the exact words that crypto and Bitcoin in and of itself is disgusting. And, just the way that things have been moving. And I could definitely make arguments. I could definitely agree with certain parts of the crypto market that are kind of like make no sense. And we've talked about that. And as Doge actually went crazy this weekend again, as pullback. But, when there's use cases and that sort of thing, especially when it comes to cryptocurrency, I think it's probably more or less a lack of understanding, or maybe it's a refusal to understand cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I liken it to sports, and you think about coaches. Like a good example is Bobby Knight. Bobby Knight was one of the greatest college coaches there was in college basketball.
Right.
And he had a very unique way of doing things. He was, very authoritarian, very militaristic type, and aggressive. And like he was the coach. In Indiana, he was a coach like that everybody aspired to of NCAA. And you fast forward to then the 90s and the early 2000s come, and his style of coaching no longer worked. You couldn't be that aggressive. You couldn't throw things. You couldn't, even like attack the player. Whereas like if it was the 70s or 80s, he could have attacked the player and nobody would have cared.
Right.
And he didn't evolve. Some coaches evolve, some coaches don't, and they fall behind and they're left behind. And I think that's what's happening with Warren Buffett is he's at a point where things evolve. The traditional metrics for how we look at stocks are different. Like it's not about PE ratios. It's not about any of that, partly because of technology and things move so fast now, but also partly just because there's a different group of traders and really the companies are very different as well. So growth is just much more like rapid.
Right.
And so it doesn't feel like he's evolved with the times, which is not surprising, but you've got to evolve with the times. It's a new way to trade. And I don't want to say it's like totally different, but clearly, you hear people who are like, fundamentally, this thing is hot. And like, you're not looking at that anymore. Like it's just, we're looking at different metrics. And it feels like maybe either doesn't want to go with the times or maybe he's just a little bit cocky about like, doesn't want to change his ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, the guy's got $145 billion just sitting in cash. And I actually, Michael Batnick, if you guys don't know who he is, CNBC correspondent, and he was put on something on Twitter about how he doesn't own any Bitcoin, and it's like he's got $145 billion and he's putting it to work in other ways. And it's like if I was, if I was born in the 20s and I tried to wrap my head around Bitcoin, I would not give a shit. Like I have this huge giant pile of cash sitting aside. Like I'm just going to go invest in what I know, and I think that's what it comes down to. It's like, they can give their opinions on crypto and that sort of thing, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, he's doing exactly what we tell everybody to do, and that's just invest in the things that you know. And, if you don't understand something, you're not going to invest in it, and that's definitely something that Warren's not going to do. If he doesn't get it, then he's not putting his money there. And I think that's really what it all boils down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you look at that goes for new stuff, newer companies, but that also goes for legacy companies. He's heavily invested in American Express, heavily. We consider it the third best.
Yeah.
It's Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. And I don't even think American Express is anywhere in the same stratosphere as Visa. And so you also wonder how his due diligence is going as far as the existing companies, because if you look at American Express compared to Visa, to me, it's crystal clear.
Yeah.
Visa is the answer.
Absolutely.
And so he's got companies like that I feel like it's almost like he's not also like reevaluating. I mean, I'm sure he obviously is, but why? I don't understand that.
I think if you have certain allegiances, you just stay loyal. And Warren has done that in the past. And I think that's why he's stuck with the airline so long, until finally just cutting the cord, because even before the pandemic and them going crazy, like the airlines were still a struggling industry. They're always in debt. They're always having issues and that sort of thing. And then obviously there's just been so many other ones where I think there's a certain sense of loyalty that you have towards them as well. And I mean, like I said, when you have that kind of money, it's like, as long as you're still making money every year and you're beating the S&P consistently, then it's like, you're not all that motivated. Something has to seriously motivate you to kind of jump ship, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. And again, when you have massive amounts of money, it's not easy to move around like our accounts. It's like, I'll just switch out like that.
Right.
It's an interesting perspective. If I was a betting man and you said Chamath, Aunt Kathy, or Warren Buffett would be at the bottom of my list.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say that, but I agree. I mean, especially because with Kathy Wood and Chamath being so open-minded and willing to learn on things that they don't understand, that's what attracts me to both of them over Warren at this point.
And they're just so much more willing to take risk, and you got to take risk to get rewarded on that. Which
I think if you look at the way that Berkshire performed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, that's essentially what's happening now with the Chamaths and Kathy Woods of the world. They're having that kind of explosive growth. I mean, you look back into the like the 60s, right? Berkshire Hathaway, 28.3%. S&P was 5%. The 70s, it was 22%. Berkshire Hathaway, 5.9%. And then the 80s, he was 40% gains to 17% in the 80s. So like he crushed it for 30 years and then just slowed it down. So I think we're probably seeing just a re-evolution of that or reincarnation of that with like the Kathy Woods and Shamas of the world today.
Andre says, Warren Buffett is someone I look up to no matter his opinion on crypto. His mindset is my goal. Patience, top level. I would agree. I mean, I think for people just getting into the market, Warren Buffett's a great place to start. When you want to increase your risk and want to take some more chances, I think you then go to other people like Aunt Kathy and Chamath. I think people just want to skip the basic fundamentals that Warren provides. But I would 100% agree. You know, he talks about mindset. He talks about, you know, really simplifying it. And I think it's great for new investors, and it's not sexy, but I think it's foundational. Warren Buffett is foundational as far as trading is concerned, investing really.
Absolutely.